often have you asked yourself, why am I listening to this nasty little saboteur in my head? You know, the one that just loves to point out your past failures and your sorrows and disappointments and tortures you with criticism, picking away at your confidence, telling you how much you can't do something. Well, one thing I can tell you is you're not alone. Almost everyone has negative self-talk at times. But if you want to start pushing back against it, stop it ruining your life, then you're in the right place, because in the next 15 minutes, I'm going to give you some really effective ways to turn your thinking around. So don't go anywhere. Hi, Leslie Hornsby here. You know, I've been coaching and training people for well over 20 years, and I've been privileged enough to witness so many of them transform their lives with a little guidance, determination, and the successful application of some amazing NLP techniques. And that's exactly what today's video is all about. You know, typically much of our internal dialogue causes us unpleasant feelings that aren't really helpful in reaching goals or succeeding in life. And I'm sure you can think of a time in your life when an internal voice intruded in this way, pitching you into an uncomfortable state. Severe negative self-talk can be the root cause of a very wide variety of problems, some of them quite serious and long-term, such as obsessive-compulsive behaviour, clinical depression, and many other addictions. In this video, I'm going to share a number of techniques that can help you transform your inner voice. So let's dive in and see how you can banish your own worst enemy. One thing is certain, that those voices in our heads, that inner dialogue that we all experience from time to time, almost always carries a negative bias. Things start to become problematic, however, when you allow this kind of chatter too much influence, so that it begins to impact on your confidence, self-esteem and productivity. Getting into that cycle of thought can make life feel pretty bleak. Studies suggest that how we speak to ourselves has a powerful impact on our mental and physical health, including weight control, managing stress, and improving sports or academic performance. Now, it may surprise you to know, however, that essentially the thoughts themselves are not entirely the issue, but rather it's the weight we give them. Our choice to engage with them and the stories we create around them are the real hurdle. Being able to identify when you're falling into one of those traps is the first step to a reappraisal of whether your interpretation of a situation is helpful or stopping you from living a fulfilling life. Another feature of negative self-talk is often in the process of fighting to overcome it. We ironically gift it with greater weight and significance. Although it might sound counterintuitive, it's helpful to stop resisting. When you resist a behaviour or mental attitude, it pulls your focus towards it, emphasising it. Accepting it is the first step in letting it go. Now, you can remember a time probably when you found it difficult to sleep because your mind was racing with unpleasant memories. Did you find that the more desperately you tried to block those negative thoughts, the more they persisted? Well, one very ancient way to tackle this dilemma is to learn how to turn your focus to something else, allowing the unwanted voice to recede into the background. Withdrawing your attention from what's troubling you can break the cycle and turn your attention to some aspect of your present, such as concentrating on your breathing or maybe the physical sensations you're experiencing. That could be the weight of your clothes, the temperature of your skin, maybe hearing ambient sounds in the room, and so on. Another tactic you can also try is to engage in an activity, particularly one that requires some degree of concentration. Attending something in the present in this way helps draw your attention from the internal voice, focused on probably the past or the future, and sometimes something that's currently happening elsewhere. Learning how to redirect your attention in this way can liberate you from being defenseless against your negative self-talk. The idea of internal dialogue is generally recognized and understood. What few people consider when it occurs, however, is where it's located in their personal space. You might not be aware, but we do subconsciously attribute a location to that voice, and where we place it can influence the degree to which it impacts on us. This being the case, changing its imagined location can change your emotional response to it. So try listening to the troublesome voice that's upsetting you. Notice its location in your personal space. For some, that might mean that it's located somewhere inside the head, or maybe the space immediately around it. Or you might imagine it in front or behind, or it may be left, right, up or down. Once you've established its position, then you need to consider its direction. Is it pointed towards you, or is it away from you, or somewhere between? If it helps you to pin down direction, just try gesturing towards the voice. When located outside your head, for many people, the inner voice tends to be pointed towards them. You can also try imagining the voice coming from your heart area or your stomach, maybe even at your elbow. And you'll find, it could be far away from you, off in the distance. And you have to establish for yourself the location and direction of your inner dialogue, because by experimenting and changing that, then you can notice any change in your response to it. For example, when the voice is pointing away, most people experience a drop in volume and then their response comes less intense. Changing the location allows you to experience the voice differently, and through a process of elimination, you can settle on where it has the least negative impact on you. Now you've worked on location and direction of that voice, you can try experimenting with its tone. Now this often makes it easier and more comfortable to listen to. So for example, you might hear a particularly self-critical inner voice as harsh and loud, in which case you could try altering it to a softer voice, maybe lowering volume, or if it's a male voice, try changing it to female, or vice versa. The execution of this NLP exercise, as I'm sure you realise, is in reality rather more involved than it's realistic for me to reproduce in this video. So if you would like a fuller explanation of refocusing and changing direction, I've added a link below to a brilliant PDF booklet written by Andreas, who's an American psychotherapist and author, and he specialises in neuro-linguistic programming. Now, negative self-talk can take many forms, so for now, we're going to get acquainted with just 4 of the most predominant types. So let's start with personalization. Now this is when you have a tendency to automatically blame yourself for something that's happened. You might recognize this if you've often found yourself thinking, no, it's not you, it's me. Let's say you've arranged to meet up with a friend, but she's texted you to say something's come up and we have to reschedule. If you personalize it, that's when you assume her reason for cancelling is actually because she doesn't want to see you, or maybe because she's had a better offer. And you don't stop to consider that her reason for cancelling might be legitimate. Even if she tells you the reason, you do tend to doubt it. One tactic to begin to overcome this mindset is to challenge your thought processes by using an NLP technique called meta-model questions. It's a case of breathe deeply and reflect on the situation from a disassociated state. What I mean by that is you have to think about the situation from a distance rather than being in the moment. Try asking yourself questions such as, is there any evidence to support my belief? Are my thoughts factual or just my interpretation of the situation? Is it true that I'm the reason this thing's happened? At the same time as considering these questions, you should also entertain alternative explanations and use reframing to counter your negative thoughts. If you accept that your friend does care about you, what then could be a more realistic reason for her cancelling? Whenever you feel the urge to self-blame, take a moment to reflect on how you react to disappointment. Those moments when your default position is to jump to a negative conclusion. If you can learn to challenge this thinking pattern, to recognise it as unfounded, you're in a better position to question whether your response is rational and reasonable, and if not, using meta-model questions, establish for yourself why not. Work on recognising your tendency to blame yourself and that it has no basis in fact. It's also useful to remember that you can't always be sure of another person's motivation for doing something. It's often not clear why people behave as they do, and assuming that it's your fault, well, that's just nonsensical. Another helpful approach is to treat each one of your negative thoughts as having a positive intention behind it. Now this, I know, sounds a bit odd, but all our actions and thoughts are actually rooted in a desire for pleasure and for pleasurable outcomes. Negativity generally indicates that something is missing or unfulfilled in us. Now you might find that what comes to mind when you're reflecting on this is likely to be framed in the negative to begin with. So for example, I don't want to be disappointed, I don't want to be hurt, or I just don't want to be embarrassed. So despite being unpleasant, all these are actually rooted in a positive intent. The goal is to switch to a positive. So ask yourself, what do I want instead? I don't want to be disappointed, and this is a negative thought that's affecting me adversely. So now ask the part of you, what do you want instead? You may find that your answer comes back as something like, I want you to be happy. Or instead of being embarrassed, the positive intent is, I want you to be at peace. Now you have a nice positive direction and goal to work with. Understanding what you need to do to try to fulfill these things can offer clues to your current mindset and behaviour and allow you to opt for a more satisfying and positive alternative. It's also important to be kind to yourself too. Try replacing self-blame with self-compassion. You know, taking these bumps in the road personally just makes life that much harder. If, by the way, you'd like to know more about NLP meta model, I talk about that in much more detail in a free PDF guide that I've published that's entitled 3 NLP Techniques to a Happier Life. It's a guide that I also talk about 2 other techniques in, which is anchoring and reframing. So if you'd like a copy of that, I've also put a link to that below this video too. Next then on our list of 4 is filtering. This is where you have a tendency to magnify the negative aspects of a situation and filter out all the positives, so that no matter what happens, you disregard what's been accomplished and focus on what you have left to do. The result is a negatively filtered view of the outcome. So an example would be, let's say you've gone on a diet and so far you've managed to lose 10 pounds, but the last time you weighed yourself, your weight had stayed the same. Instead of being happy about your weight loss, you just negatively focus on a single day where there was a lack of progress. A useful approach to dealing with this kind of negative self-talk is to remind yourself of the true merit of what you've already accomplished. Resist the temptation to just dwell on what you haven't done, but instead reflect on and acknowledge this as a negative view. Try to eliminate the emotional content of your thinking and suspend judgment by mentally removing yourself from the equation. Now, with as much objectivity as you can muster, you need to ask yourself, what have I done that's going to help me get closer to where I want to go? The truth is, every accomplishment, no matter how big or small, can outweigh the negative if you choose to allow yourself a positive outlook. When you begin to look at the glass as half full instead of half empty, life will feel so much more rewarding. To consolidate your thoughts, just try writing down your answers and read them aloud to yourself. Taking time to intentionally reflect on the bigger picture can reveal all the positives that you might have previously overlooked. Moving on then to polarizing. If you're someone who polarizes things, it means you see things only as either good or bad. There's simply no middle ground. Either you achieve perfection or you are a total failure. An example of this would be, say you make a pact with yourself that you're going to go to the gym every day for a week. But come Sunday, well, you just feel like having a break. Thereafter, however, you spend the rest of that day berating yourself for being lazy. No surprise here that I'd advocate a little kindness and give yourself a break. There is no value in criticizing yourself for being human, and you need to allow yourself to make choices that meet your needs in the moment. Polarizing negative self-talk can be very destructive to your mental health because it doesn't allow room for compromise, so that you end up setting unrealistic standards for yourself. Just as with personalization, try using meta questions to challenge your thinking. What's the real consequence of missing a day at the gym? Will I never go again as a result? Have I permanently ruined my health? The 4th and final type of negative self-talk is catastrophizing. There are, by the way, many more subgroups and subtleties to how your inner voice can affect your behaviour, but obviously if I tried to address all of them in this video, we'd end up being here for hours, and nobody wants that. Okay, so catastrophizing. This is when you find that the slightest negative outcome can trigger an anticipation of the worst outcomes in all areas of your life. By believing calamity is inevitable, you have catastrophized the outcome. This type of thinking takes cause and effect reasoning to an illogical extreme. You get stuck in traffic on the way to work and you immediately assume things are going to go really badly and you're going to be stuck in a queue for hours. Traffic is terrible, I'm going to be late, now my whole day's ruined. Another example, your partner leaves the house in the morning without their customary I love you. You think, well, he didn't say I love you this morning, we must be about to break up. To combat this kind of destructive negative thinking, it's important to remember that not every action you take is related. While you may be late for work because of traffic, it doesn't automatically mean that your day's a washout. Likewise, your partner forgetting to say I love you doesn't automatically mean that your relationship is on the rocks. It's useful to put these kind of extreme thoughts into perspective. First, you might ask yourself, well, how likely is that to happen? Follow this up by considering other outcomes and distinguish between uncomfortable versus catastrophe. How often have you actually been stuck in a traffic jam for hours? If you were, wouldn't things still be okay in the long run? Taking a step back and looking at a situation for what it really is will help you pull things into a more realistic focus and help you reevaluate your reaction. I really hope today's video has gone some way to helping you conquer that inner critic. Just remember, you're human. Beating yourself up for failing to be perfect is not going to improve your life. The fact is, Not every situation is going to go your way, and that is pretty much guaranteed. Try a little compassion and patience with yourself as you begin to cultivate deeper self-awareness. Shifting long established patterns of negative self-talk is no easy task. It takes a strong will, discipline, and a determination to change how you think. Eradicating your inner critic is a massive challenge, but I trust you now understand that there are ways to empower yourself to tackle it and start living a more positive life. Join me again next time for more of some of NLP's cutting-edge processes and techniques designed to help you lead a fulfilling life. And don't forget to hit subscribe to this YouTube channel to get more videos on a regular basis. And don't forget about the link to get your free guide to more NLP techniques. But for now, here's to living your best life, guys, and I'll see you again soon.